fantastic to have you here. We met last week for the first time, which was which was really really great. We sat in the hotel downtown Toronto. You had a fantastic presentation. We're surrounded by quite a few amount of people who were very excited about the story. So I was excited to sit down with you and learn a little bit more about Ibogaine and how that's taking place today in the world. So if you could just start off, let's go. What is Ibogaine? Why hasn't it been really brought to market until now?
Awesome. So thank you, Josh, for having us here. Appreciate your attention. And it was a pleasure to meet you as well in Toronto a week past. We are Universal Ibogaine, now a newly listed company on the TSXV. We're very excited about the offering in addiction, given the nature of the problem and the innovation associated with the specific tool that we're bringing, notwithstanding that we have a broader offering also in addiction. Ibogaine is a plant-based medicine. It's been, it is extracted, at least in its original form, from a plant coming from West Africa, from the Gabon specifically. This plant, this particular set of molecules that come from the plant together, combined, that we describe as the wild type Ibogaine, are an addiction disruptor. They work in a way that is very, very different from anything that we have. If we think in particular about opioid addiction management, what is common today is substitution therapy, whereby the best thing to do is to take the patient off an opioid and introduce another opioid that is safer, longer half-life, etc. Ibogaine is very, very different. It works by disrupting addiction. It rewires the brain, if we're to simplify the science a little bit, by the introduction of an agent, a stimulant that builds up a new neuron system. It also hits multiple receptors at the same time. People walk away losing the craving. They are not dependent on opioids. If we're looking specifically at opioids, I must mention Ibogaine is not only about our opioid addiction. It can be used for other addictions, alcohol, cocaine. There's some evidence also in terms of stimulants like amphetamine. But the opioids is the starting point. It's where most of the data are generated so far in terms of opioid addiction, and it works very differently from anything else that we have.
So talk to me a little bit about addiction specifically. So I assume, do you guys have numbers and figures in North America alone? How is addiction? Is it growing? Is it subsided? What's happened, especially in the last year with COVID? What are the numbers showing there?
Perfect. So let me start by this. I've never perceived addiction as a problem of the day. It's not a contemporary problem in any way. It's been with us for a long, long time. We have some sort of an amplification or intensification over the past years due to the introduction of synthetic, highly potent opioids, fentanyl in particular and its family, carfentanil, sulfentanyl, etc. But addiction has always been with us, and it's not only about opioids. If you go and speak with the National Institutes of Health in the US, NIDA in particular is a certain agency, they keep reminding us that despite all this attention toward opioids addiction, the big problem that we have in terms of mortality, in terms of morbidity, is actually alcohol addiction. It's been with us for a much longer time. So we have a generalized problem here in terms of patients having a particular predisposition, genetically associated with environmental factors, cultural factors that lead to something sort of troubling, and ends up in a place where we don't want it to go. And addiction is also part of a larger, sort of call it intertwined with a larger set of illnesses that we refer to as mental illnesses, behavioral health, behavioral illnesses. And sometimes it comes with them. So you start with addiction, and then you see anxiety, you see depression, and sometimes there's a trauma that leads to addiction. So it's part of a larger system of different illnesses that come together. The numbers continue to be staggering, especially today. I think we are talking, if we're looking at the US, which tracks very, very well, of course, I think we had more than 100,000 deaths in the US this year due to overdose. We here in Canada, we have confidence that 1 out of every 5 Canadians has been touched by addiction in one form or the other over their lifetime. On average, I think every few hours we have sort of death due to overdose here in Canada. So it's a chronic problem, and that's what I'd like to think also about addiction. It's a chronic illness. It's a problem that has been with us for a long time, but we have a specific intensification today with highly synthetic opioids.
So you call Ibogaine the addiction interrupter, but let's go back to your earlier point. Ibogaine versus other pharmaceutical or plant-based alternatives. Why would I choose Ibogaine over those?
Awesome. So I should always preface that we are here in Canada in the process of developing Ibogaine. So I'd like to think of it always as a drug candidate as opposed to a drug. It's very important. Having said that, though, there's been a body of literature over the past 40 years in different jurisdictions. It's not the highest quality of evidence that we refer to as coming out of controlled, blinded, randomized clinical trials, but it's substantive in terms of showing that Ibogaine works on addiction in a way, Josh, that is very different from anything else that we have seen. Today, if I'm a patient with addiction and opioids is my poison of choice, what happens is that if they're to get me off opioids, especially some of those highly potent synthetic ones, what the physician will do is that they will take away that fentanyl, let's say, and put me on something like methadone or buprenorphine associated with naltrexone, what we call Suboxone. The idea is to make sure, A, that I am not exposed to street drugs, B, that I am substituting a drug that has a longer half-life, stays for my body longer, for something that is short-acting, intense. So I am in a safer environment, but I'm always, or for a long period of time, still on opioids. I've taken one away, I put another one away that is safer. Ibogaine is not an opioid. Let's start with that. It is not substitution therapy. It's a drug that has a very different mechanism of action. It hits some of the receptors that usually pick up opioids. We call them the mu receptors. It also hits other receptors that are associated with the mechanism of addiction, such as dopamine receptors and others also. And it does that in multiple sites, on multiple sites in the brain. In addition to this, it releases something called glial-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a neuro generator that allows cells to grow, neurons, nervous cells to grow. And what that does is that it rewires the brain. The clinical result of all of this is that those patients that walk after their Ibogaine treatment, walk out of the Ibogaine treatment, they lose that craving that is very characteristic of addiction. And they do this for a period of time. Substantive period of time, a few months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. It gives us a great opportunity, in addition to getting them off the drug, to introduce all sorts of modalities that in the past have not had that chance to go in because of the addiction state they're in. We can apply psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral training, dialectical, whatever. We can introduce other agents. We can deal with their trauma. We can deal with their anxiety, with their depression. In addition to it being an effective disruptor or interrupter, as you called it, Josh, of addiction, it opens a window of opportunity for us to come in with all sorts of treatments so that we make sure that this addiction is gone and is gone for good. Today, substitution therapy and other modalities that we have, if we do not apply a prolonged therapy, we end up with 9 out of 10 patients within a year's time relapsing, going back into addiction. With Ibogaine, the numbers so far are much better than this. And we are hoping to be able to show that in clinical trials here in Canada.
Okay, and so is it legal in Canada right now?
It is not. We're working on developing it to make it legal. Let me take a step back. Health Canada at one point in time did not mind having Ibogaine as a natural substance that is being used for health benefit. It came to a point in 2017 whereby Health Canada got a little bit jittery about an agent that is that potent circulating here in Canada without necessarily supervision. So what they've done is they've taken it from the category of free-for-all and they've put it in a group called, or in a category called the prescription drug list. What that means is that in their view, this is a drug once developed that could be like a cholesterol drug or a hypertension drug or a diabetes drug. It just needs to be developed to get to this category. I contrast that with its position in other countries. In the US, it is considered a Schedule I substance, which means that it is, from the perspective of the US FDA, no medicinal value and open for abuse. Here in Canada, we have a big advantage of being part of this prescription drug list, and we are very excited about going through trials in order to medicalize it here in Canada in the near future.
So you are pursuing clinical trials right now, correct? In Canada, and where are those happening?
They're going to be happening in Canada. We are still at a stage whereby we've lined up what we needed to line up. We're going to putting forward ultimately what we call a clinical trial application and launch. The thinking is the nature of the study calls for 1 to 2 sites. We think that this is going to happen primarily in perhaps central Canada. Ontario is our main target for doing these trials.
Okay, so you have an addiction recovery center in Manitoba that's currently generating revenue for the company. That's correct. How long have you had that for?
That's correct. This was our qualifying transaction as we went public now. So it's a recent acquisition. We're very excited to have the Kelburn Recovery Center Clinic. It's a rehabilitation facility, takes patients into the process of recovery. It sits on 50 acres of land. We have great ambition to develop that piece of property for all things addiction and all things perhaps psychedelic. There's interest to work with the University of Manitoba to build up a research park. Itself, the clinic can take on a medical detoxification facility, which we're interested in introducing, which means that we have a comprehensive, holistic sort of treatment continuum, if you will, and ultimately it becomes home for Ibogaine. We might be in a position to introduce earlier psychedelics or authorized in Canada. A lot of great ideas about Kelburn that we would like to apply soon.
Yeah, very exciting. And where are your other locations? You have clinics in the Caribbean as well?
Perfect. So this is, let me just explain this one. It's a bit sort of mysterious. We have a very strong association with the Clear Sky Recovery Solutions out of Cancun, Mexico. We have all their data because this is the clinic. Dr. Alberto Sola, who is also a member of our board and a co-founder of Universal Ibogaine, he's treated with Ibogaine now for addiction, primarily but not exclusively opioid addiction, because he treated other addictions. He administered more than 3,700 sort of therapies of Ibogaine over the past 10 years, safely and very, very effectively. Our association with the Clear Sky Clinic today is that of acquisition of all their data. And these data are helpful for us because they would allow us, and that's a global right for us, it'll allow us to present a more complete sort of file to Health Canada, conduct the trials in a way that is informed and safe for our shareholders because we know how we're going to design these trials for success based on the data. And ultimately, when we're medicalized, authorized, we would roll out Ibogaine with a treatment modality that resembles that we have gotten from Clear Sky, Cancun. So it's very, very valuable for us. We also have a right of first refusal on acquiring that clinic, Josh. What's between us and acquiring the clinic is, well, we have to make sure that our regulator here in Canada and ultimately also the US is okay with us taking on the ownership of a clinic that administers a drug, Ibogaine, that is still a drug candidate here in Canada. We're very optimistic that this is something that we can do in the near future. We just want to make sure that we are crossing the T's and dotting the I's before we take that extra step.
So what I'm hearing is that you're getting data from over 3,000 treatments ultimately, and then bringing that forward into your clinical trials. So you're not starting from square one, are you?
Not at all. So when I started describing the platform of the company, I mentioned that it's a biotech play in part because now we know that we have addiction clinics. So Mask is also a healthcare provision company, but the biotech play is quite de-risked. It is quite de-risked because we know the answer somewhat in advance based on these more than 3,700 treatments that have been taken care of in Cancun. The biggest number in biotech is always risk. It's the risk of development of a drug. Will the drug show to be successful, effective, efficacious, I should say, or safe? In our case, we are fairly confident based on the general literature about Ibogaine, but specifically what we got out of Cancun.
Okay, you just raised how much money?
We raised $6 million in this private placement toward listing.
And what's the plan for the $6 million?
The majority of it, I would say about 80% of it is going to be geared toward the clinical development program, starting with Ibogaine, of course. Some money also will go toward optimizing our addiction management model in Kelburn. Optimizing Kelburn, we are also spending some energy G&A, but some energy also looking at the possibility of acquiring other clinics in the near future.
Okay, interesting. And so what are some of the other growth drivers here? Obviously, in near term and long term, as I think about you starting to go public and trading on the market, what are shareholders really looking for here in terms of growth?
Tons. It's very, very exciting, and we have many, many opportunities for growth. There is sufficient. Let me put it this way: there is sufficient growth potential in either platform of what we're taking forward. These two platforms primarily being one, the development of medicines for addiction, starting with Ibogaine as a central piece, and the other one being treating addiction in clinics. If we are a company that is only one of these two platforms, there will be tremendous opportunities for growth. Let's start with the drug development platform. Ibogaine by itself is a platform. It's a wild type drug that has come from nature. The plant in this case is directing us toward the solution, but it is also inviting us to innovate in terms of the composition of that Ibogaine. Ibogaine could become a in the future a different formulation. It could be loaded up on a different delivery system. It could be Ibogaine 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 in terms of minor compositions, what they call changes, what they call a prodrug, what they call co-crystallization with another drug. So even for Ibogaine itself, we could find ourselves with an array of medicines that are based on the Ibogaine platform, that work differently, that add value in different ways. And all of this is intellectual property that is generated and can be protected and can generate value to shareholders. There are other medicines also for addiction that we're interested in working with. We're interested in working with psychedelics. Ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin have shown to have some value in what they call the comorbidity of addiction. So anxiety, depression, the trauma that led to that addiction. We are interested in working with those concomitantly with Ibogaine. There are other medicines for addiction also that complement the Ibogaine platform. We're not going to go into that, but all of those are fair game for us, and all of those, when the time is right, when there is a driver for growth, we would like to explore. You go to the other platform and you're talking about addiction treatment. In addiction treatment, there's the pre-care, there is the medical detox, there is the rehabilitation, there is the aftercare, there is what they call sober living. All of those are mechanics that we would like to explore, build up, work through. I should mention that those will not wait for Ibogaine development. We do not need, as much as we're excited about Ibogaine, we don't need for it to come to the finish line for us to be able to treat addiction innovatively. There are some informatics, telemedicine, and what have you that are important in managing addiction. There are the mental health areas associated with addiction. There's a lot for us to do. What holds us back is just being able to time this, do it in the right sequence, and of course, the support of shareholders as we go forward as this company goes.
There's been a lot of talk about plant-based medicines, especially people, traditional investors moving from the cannabis space into the psychedelic space. You have people like Kevin O'Leary who are regularly talking on TV about, psychedelic space is providing a lot more upside. You get these, small cap, what you call de-risk biotech plays who are ultimately just trying to bet on that one drug that's going to take them to that $1 billion market cap. And you're betting on the right horse. So you obviously have a few competitors in the mix, some pursuing, different treatments in line with you guys. Why are you the right horse here?
Many reasons for this. I think there's a big differentiator for us as a company from any of those players out there who are admittedly large right now. And that is, we are not as much focused on what we call a technology franchise, Josh. We are not out there saying we are a psychedelics company. What we are is a company that is working in a particular disease area, being addiction. We are introducing tools innovative tools for the treatment of addiction that happen to come, at least in part, from the psychedelic family of medicines. And that's a major differentiator from the competitors that are out there, be they MindMed or someone else, because they describe themselves as a psychedelics company. We are using psychedelics in part to treat addiction. We are using other things to treat addiction. We are also big on the healthcare provision. So we're not a pure drug development company or biotech company. We also have clinics. We're going to be treating addiction using our clinics. I think we're a much more robust set of platforms as a company. We are very de-risked. We are in the disease area. And ultimately, we're going to be very, very patient-centric or focused. And that's a very different model from anything that I've seen out there. I'll finish by saying we wish the best for everybody. It's a new area, an emerging area. There's a lot of work ahead of us collectively, and it's going to be the tide that would lift all boats. When you come to a new area like this, mental health generally, behavioral health, addiction has been hugely underserved. Very wanting. It's been stale for some time. So getting activity into the area would help everybody, and there's a lot to be done.
Well, it's fantastic. Listen, we're gonna talk again. I want to get a little bit more in depth the next time we talk on Ibogaine specifically, but really appreciate the overview. Good luck with the list. We're gonna be in touch soon.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Josh. Thank you, everyone.